It's funny how life hands you lessons, sometimes wrapped up in a pretty bow, and sometimes just smacking you right across the face. For me, that lesson came in the form of a little blue bungalow, and the face that got smacked belonged to Kevin. I bought my house 3 years ago. It wasn't fancy. It was a classic 1950s ranch sitting on a quarter-acre lot in a decent, if slightly unhip neighborhood just outside the main city loop. It had peeling paint, the kitchen cabinets were avocado green, and the roof needed replacing, but it was mine. When I signed those papers, I felt like I had finally built a foundation. I was 29, and I was an owner, not a renter. Kevin, my boyfriend at the time, saw it differently. He lived in the sky. Seriously, Kevin rented a stunning corner unit in the newest high-rise downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, granite countertops, a doorman, and a view that cost more than my annual salary. He loved the flexibility, the transient nature of it all. He thought owning a house was like wearing a financial straitjacket. The day I closed, I remember him coming over. I was standing in the empty living room, smelling the old wood and plaster, absolutely beaming. Kevin walked in wearing designer jeans and looked around the room like he expected a cockroach to crawl out at any moment. He didn't say, "Congratulations." He said, "Wow, this is cozy." I knew what that meant. It's a starter home, Kevin. It's got good bones. And my mortgage payment is less than half of what you pay for that glorified glass box. He laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that says, "I feel sorry for you." "Lisa, darling," he said, leaning against the doorway, "you've officially become predictable. You're tied down. You're a mortgage slave. I move freely. I have options. This whole equity thing is just a fancy word for being boring. Look at this neighborhood. It's lovely, sure, if you enjoy the sound of lawnmowers and the smell of freshly cut grass. I prefer the hum of the city and the smell of money." That word, predictable, stung. I was practical, yes. I had saved for years. I had foregone fancy vacations and expensive dinners to put that down payment together. Kevin, meanwhile, was constantly upgrading his tech, taking spontaneous trips to Tulum and driving a leased car he couldn't really afford. But he had the facade of success, and I had a leaky faucet. For the next year, the comparison was constant. We'd be at dinner with friends, and Kevin would inevitably steer the conversation toward his lifestyle. "Lisa is busy playing homeowner," he'd joke. "She spent her Saturday learning how to caulk a window. Me? I was sipping champagne at the rooftop pool, deciding which city I'm going to move to next when my lease is up." Our relationship started to fray around the edges. He hated driving out to my suburb. It was a 15-minute drive, max. He hated that I couldn't just drop everything and fly off because I had to save for the new water heater. He saw my stability as a weakness, a lack of ambition. I, in turn, started seeing his lifestyle as fragile. Every time he talked about his extravagant rent, which seemed to increase by a few $100s every 6 months, I pictured my fixed mortgage payment, steady as a rock. Then, the market exploded. Our city had always been expensive, but about a year and a half into my home ownership, something shifted. A couple of massive tech companies relocated their headquarters, bringing thousands of high-paid workers. Suddenly, demand for rental units, especially high-end luxury units like Kevin's, went absolutely vertical. It wasn't a gradual rise. It was an overnight spike. I remember watching the local news. They were calling it a rental apocalypse. Landlords were terminating existing leases just to relist apartments at astronomical prices. A basic one-bedroom that cost $2,500 was suddenly $3,500. Kevin's high-rise, the one with the granite and the view, was ground zero for the madness. Kevin's lease was due to expire in 2 months. He wasn't worried at first. He figured he'd talk to the building manager, maybe negotiate a small increase. He called me one Tuesday afternoon, and for the first time, the confidence was gone from his voice. It was replaced by a tight, panicked edge. "Lisa, you won't believe this," he whispered. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet. "What is it, Kevin?" "My rent. They sent the renewal notice. They want $6,000 a month." I gasped. "6,000? Kevin, that's double what you were paying." "I know. I told them it was insane. I said I'd been a perfect tenant. They just shrugged and said, 'The market sets the price, sir.' They already have a waiting list of corporate transfers willing to pay it." His whole world of luxury and flexibility was crashing down around him. He was trapped. He couldn't afford $72,000 a year just for rent, even with his good salary, and he couldn't find anything comparable for less. The places that were technically affordable were dumpy, far away, and still overpriced by 50%. He spent the next 6 weeks in a frenzy. He was constantly on his phone, snapping at me, stressed out of his mind. He looked exhausted. The freedom he worshipped had turned into financial tyranny. "I can't believe this," he'd rage. "This city is unlivable. I might have to move across the country." I watched him struggle, and honestly, the only feeling I had was deep, profound relief that I was out of that game. My mortgage payment? Still the same low number. My house value? It had doubled. My boring equity was now my fortress. "You know, Kevin," I said gently one evening, "if you hadn't laughed at the idea of a fixed-rate mortgage, you might be safe right now." He flinched. "Don't lecture me, Lisa. I don't need to hear about your stable little cage right now." But the market didn't care about his pride. 2 weeks before his move-out date, he was desperate. He had rejected every affordable place he'd seen because they weren't up to his standards. He was suddenly facing homelessness, or at least living out of his leased car. We broke up formally right before his lease ended. The stress had completely eroded anything left of our relationship. He realized he needed a practical partner, and I realized I needed a partner who respected my choices, not someone who mocked my stability. The final straw came on a Saturday morning. I was in my backyard, pulling weeds and listening to the birds chirp. The sound of predictability, I suppose. My phone rang. It was Kevin. His voice was thin and defeated. "Lisa," he started, a long pause following. "Look, I'm moving out today. I have nowhere to go. What about those friends you were staying with? They can only take me for a couple more nights. I tried to find a sublet, but everything is gone. I have all my stuff in a storage unit, but I need a landing spot." He finally got to the point, and the humiliation in his voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Can I crash on your couch? Just for a few weeks, until I figure out a real plan? Please, Lisa, I'm begging you. I have nowhere left to turn." The silence on my end lasted for a full minute. I looked at my small, boring, predictable house. I looked at the patchy lawn I was trying to fix. I thought about the security I felt every single night, knowing that no landlord could arbitrarily price me out of my home. And then I thought about Kevin, the man who called me predictable and mocked my foundation, now standing metaphorically naked in the middle of a financial storm. "Kevin," I said, my voice calm and steady, "do you remember calling my house a cage? I was an idiot, Lisa. I know I was. I was arrogant. You laughed at my choice. You laughed at the idea of stability. You thought the view from your penthouse was worth burning money every month, and you called my equity boring." I was wrong, he admitted, the forced humility sounding painful. I realize now that stability isn't boring. It's essential. You were smart. You built something real. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about vindication. I wasn't going to leave him on the street, but he had to understand the gravity of the irony. "Okay, Kevin," I finally conceded. "You can sleep on the couch, but you need to understand something. You are here because you scorned the very foundation you now desperately need." He moved in that night. The sight of Kevin, the former king of the high-rise, unpacking a small duffel bag next to my worn, slightly lumpy sectional couch was priceless. His tailored suits hung awkwardly on the back of the guest room door. He had to share my one bathroom, where the shower pressure was mediocre. He didn't complain, though. He was too exhausted and too humbled. He spent the first few nights staring blankly at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of the neighborhood. The hum of the city he loved was replaced by the distant chirp of crickets and, yes, the smell of freshly cut grass. He had traded a $6,000 a month view of the skyline for a free view of my television set and the realization that his idea of success was built on sand. My small, modest, predictable house wasn't a cage. It was a lifeboat. And for the first time in his life, Kevin was grateful for the boring stability he had once mocked. He stayed for 3 weeks. He was quiet, helpful, and constantly searching for a place he could actually afford, a place that looked far more like my starter home than his former palace. When he finally left, moving into a modest apartment miles away from the trendy downtown core, he didn't laugh. He shook my hand and looked me straight in the eye. "Thank you, Lisa," he said genuinely. "You built something strong. I learned my lesson. Stability isn't predictable. It's priceless." And as I locked the door behind him and walked back into my small, safe, perfectly predictable living room, I finally felt like I had won more than an argument. I had won my peace. That little blue bungalow was the best investment I ever made.